Hi, welcome to the Men's Forum. I'm your host, Gary Costanza, and I have with me the Public Relations Director of the National Coalition of Free Men, Steven Svoboda, Esquire. Welcome. Tonight, we're going to discuss circumcision, very important subject for men and boys, and also a lawsuit that Steven, as Executive Director of the Attorneys for the Rights of the Child, is bringing against a local hospital regarding a circumcision without consent. Is that correct, Steve?
That's correct. What happened, Gary, is that there was a couple. It's a Greek man and an Ecuadorian wife of his. They live in Queens, and they went to this hospital when their child was born. They used the hospital, and after he was born, he was circumcised, and the hospital did not explain the circumcision, and they didn't get any consent for it from the mother. And this is something they've been doing to a lot of Spanish-speaking mothers of sons, and it's something that should not be happening. So that's why the lawsuit was brought.
Horrible, horrible. Very good. Oh, I'm so glad you're doing that, because here we have this whacked-out tradition of circumcising newborn boys, and in a supposed civilized society, and and we look at third world countries as being backwards, where it seems to be the reverse here.
Right. And let me say first of all that a lot of people right now might be having the same reaction I had when I first heard about circumcision, which is that sounds like a minor issue. There's so many other things in the world that are more important. Why even worry about it? Why even deal with it? Well, it's interesting. We think that it is an important issue. First of all, it can have effects for your lifetime. It can affect your sexual sensitivity. It can have complications, which can be very serious. Boys die every year from circumcision to the tune of 200 some odd in the U.S. Every year boys lose their penises. Serious complications happen. Beyond that, we came onto this earth meant to have all of our natural organs. And if we're going to give them up and decide to do that as adults and know what we're doing, that's one thing. But if it's being done when you're an infant and you have no choice in the matter, and especially if the parents do not want it, and in this case, the parents are extremely upset. The child is very ostracized when they go to Greece, where the father's from, because nobody there circumcises, and they bathe in the nude, and the son actually cannot do that. And he feels very strange about the whole thing. He's now 6 years old. And so it's a very serious thing, and it's really, it may sound strange, but it's actually really seriously affected the family. The father's had a lot of psychological problems, being very upset about this, and
wow,
it's been very serious.
It seems like a good case.
Well, we thought so.
Yeah.
We still think so.
Yeah, okay.
We unfortunately had some, we got into a situation in court where we didn't really get our fair chance at a fair hearing, and the case is going to be appealed. And I think it's a difficult issue. I think people have difficulty, Gary, in understanding it and taking it seriously, and I think the judge in this case was no exception to that. And we're confident, as you say, that once it's understood and once the information gets out there, that we will win the case.
Well, what has to be changed is the culture, the attitude of people, as you say. People are not used to hearing this or even thinking about it. You may have the law on your side, but as you say, that if the judge doesn't get it, it's not going to happen.
Well, it's a funny thing about the law being on our side.
People don't get
right.
Getting it.
Exactly. Yeah. The law is on our side, and it isn't on our side. I mean, it is on our side in the sense that it should be on our side if it was properly interpreted, but of course, human beings apply the law, and human beings are affected by their own prejudices. Just like a while ago we had slavery incorporated into the law in the U.S., it seemed fine to most people. It seemed natural. You know, blacks were thought, they weren't called blacks then, but I'll use the term that we're using now, were thought to be inferior to whites and stupid, and seemed totally natural they would be enslaved and have no rights, and the law went along with that. And that changed, and a lot of other things have changed too as we've gotten more awareness. And really, if you look at the law today, circumcision really is illegal under a number of laws, assault, child abuse, but the judges often don't interpret it that way because it's not understood, and the judges maybe circumcise themselves if they're males, and for understandable reasons they don't want to go there. It's a tricky issue. I mean, it's at the intersection of sexuality and our own self-image, and it relates in some people's minds to religion, and there's all these hot button issues that make it hard to talk about.
Sure are. We've covered the subject a couple of times, and all these different issues intersect, of course.
Absolutely.
All right, how about this? Before we get into the specifics of the case, which we've touched on, but what is circumcision?
Well, circumcision is, as usually practiced in the U.S., is the surgical removal of the foreskin, and usually it happens at infancy, and typically within the first week or so of life. And the vast majority of circumcisions, I want to dispel a rumor here, that 99% of circumcisions are not done to Jewish children. I should say, I was going to say to Jewish children, but I caught myself because I don't want to say that. I want to say they're not done to children of Jewish people. They're done to children of non-Jewish people. And the reason I say it that way is because everybody has the right, I believe, once they become an adult, to choose their own religion. And that's one of the reasons why we believe that circumcision is not justified. And regardless of your background, you have the right to make these own decisions for yourself.
Well put, exactly, because that child did not choose their religion yet.
They haven't chosen it yet.
Infant. No.
They haven't chosen it yet.
No,
That's right.
and they haven't chosen this operation yet.
That's right. That's right. I happen to we happen to be a Jewish family myself, my own family. My wife is Jewish. My son is therefore Jewish according to Jewish law. And we plan on raising our son with some awareness of Judaism, and we consider it no contradiction at all that we haven't circumcised him. We don't plan to. In fact,
very good.
We're happy about that. And in fact, there are growing numbers of Jewish families that have chosen to do that, and Jewish people are overrepresented, greatly overrepresented in the movement against circumcision. About a third, or somewhere between a third and a fourth, of all activists against circumcision are Jewish.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I know your son is 21 months old. When were you aware of the controversy of circumcision?
Well, I guess I first started hearing about it in the 1980s, and I put it off. I thought to myself, oh, this is a crazy issue. Why would anybody get involved in this? And a number of times I had that reaction over the years. And I try to be fair-minded. I mean, it's obviously everybody who tries to be struggles with it. But as I heard the issue more and more, I eventually decided, okay, I'll look into this. And the more I looked into it, the more I just realized this is crazy. I mean, there's no medical reason for it. It started in the 19th century as a medical procedure. It started in the 19th century to stop masturbation, which at the time, a few doctors made up this theory, which had no basis, that stopping masturbation would basically cure all known diseases, epilepsy, mental problems, just circumcise the child. And by the way, it wasn't just boy children, it was girl children as well. Circumcise the boy or the girl, you'll stop masturbation, you'll have a happy child and a healthy child. And another funny thing about this is Kellogg's cornflakes were started as a way of pacifying the child and stopping masturbation. And John Harvey Kellogg, who was a doctor and wrote a very popular book called Plain Facts for Old and Young, wrote in his book that circumcision should be done, and specifically you should not use any pain relief because the pain was a positive thing. It was good that it hurt because it would give a lesson to the child, and this would help to stop them from doing these bad things that would cause all these health problems. And this was the root of Kellogg's cornflakes.
God. And it seems like that's probably the major impetus for modern circumcision. Because that book, no, I did hear about this Kellogg and his book and him being so revered, and the medical profession just ran off with it.
That's it. I mean, if we didn't have this movement happen starting in the 1860s while Queen Victoria was on the throne in England, and we were very much ourselves influenced by Victorian thinking, very anti-body sort of thinking, I believe circumcision would be very small today. Even I think a lot of Jews would have stopped it because Jewish people, as a generalization, tend to question things and inquire and learn about them and be very intelligent in inquiring, and I think they would have, some of them at least, would have concluded that it didn't make sense. But as we've adopted it as a nation, it's reduced the amount of inquiry people have done because we've had so much circumcision. And this idea that there's a medical reason, in fact what happened is there was no medical reason ever, and the medical reasons have just been changing at the convenience of the people who propose circumcision. And so today they say, oh, it'll stop AIDS. Now just stop for a second and think about this. We in the U.S. have the highest circumcision rate of any developed country. We also have the highest AIDS rate, HIV rate of any developed country. Does it make sense that circumcision is going to stop HIV? Does that make any sense at all?
Not at all. Not at all. Oh my God.
But this whole thing hasn't made sense from the beginning.
Well, as you say, they've tried to find reasons for this circumcision to condone it.
That's right.
And the latest, I believe, is cervical cancer.
Well, that's an interesting one. That was raised about 50 years ago by one very shoddy study. It was completely disproven. And then it was resuscitated about 2 or 3 years ago by this investigator in, of all places, the Castilian part of Spain, named Castelsagüe, who wrote this article, which was a survey article. It was collecting other studies. And, you know, the statistical methods he used, I mean, there's so many holes in the study, I can't even go into it, but just as one example, the statistical methods he used are completely inapplicable. He took some groups where the circumcision rate is almost zero, other groups where the circumcision rate is almost 100%, and combined them statistically and tried to produce a result that would show what he was trying to show. Well, in fact, statisticians went back and reanalyzed his data and came to the opposite conclusion that he had, that circumcision is positively associated with the cancer that he said it was negatively associated with. So you're actually increasing your chances of this problem. And you know, this was proven, and there were letters published in the journal, and they were never rebutted, but the press picked up on the original article and never picked up on the rebuttal, so that's where we're left at.
But just common sense dictates that you look at the results, and as you say, the United States has the highest rates of HIV,
right,
and also the highest rates of circumcision. And if you look at other countries where there are a lower incidence of circumcision, they don't have any higher rates of cervical cancer or any of these infections.
That's another thing. And you know, are men dropping dead every day on the street in Europe because they aren't circumcised? If it's happening, I don't know about it.
No.
And in fact, men in Europe have healthier genital situations on the average than people in the U.S. do. This great thing about circumcision making you clean and healthy and hygienic, it's just a crock. It's cultural inertia. We started this thing in the 1860s, and we can't let go of it. The doctors feel committed to it. The patients think they need it, and the doctors say, oh, well, the patient wants it. And the patient says, oh, well, the doctor asked me to do it. But the doctor is abdicating his responsibility or her responsibility here. I mean, patients can't go in and say, oh, I want my left arm amputated, or I want my nose amputated, or any functional tissue that in their entire body cannot be amputated without medical necessity, except for the foreskin on males. Not the foreskin on females, just the foreskin on males. That's the only part of your body, Gary, that you can have taken off by a doctor without medical necessity. And especially when you're doing it on infants, it becomes even more stark, and it just boggles the mind.
Yeah, it does, Steve.
You would never have it today. If we were starting from ground zero, we would never have it instituted today. It's just a holdover from 150 years ago.
It's got to be stopped. I mean, the more you look at it, the more crazy it is. Perfectly normal tissue. You wouldn't think about taking any other piece off.
That's right.
Especially in infancy.
And in fact, people are starting to realize this, that medical insurers are beginning to drop coverage for circumcision. States more and more are dropping Medicaid coverage of circumcision, and more mainstream people out there. It's not lunatics, it's not some fringe, it's professionals and concerned, serious individuals are realizing that this thing doesn't need to be done anymore. And men are getting angry when they become adults. They're bringing lawsuits. These lawsuits are succeeding. It's growing very quickly. I mean, more and more I get 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds contacting me and saying, what can I do? And in fact, there are things you can do.
Yeah. Oh, good. And you're doing it.
And we're doing it.
Thank God. We have to put these mutilators, I call them mutilators, they don't call themselves that, on notice that we're not going to stand for this. We're going to hit them in the pocketbook.
Right.
In any way that gynecologists generally do this, pediatricians also.
Right.
Because I've had ideas. I like getting in the public's face and publicizing what they're doing. I've thought of picketing hospitals. How would I go about finding out exactly who's doing it? Does every hospital have this done?
Most hospitals do it. Some do it more than others, and it depends partly on just what's the climate for circumcision around that area. There are a few hospitals in the country that don't do circumcisions, but not too many. And the methods that my organization, Attorneys for the Rights of the Child, uses don't involve civil disobedience, but we think it's fine if people are upset and they want to do something like that. That's fine. I want to say one thing, though, to clarify something. I mean, I started my organization because I'm sort of a social crusader, and we don't make money on this thing. What we're doing is we're trying to stop circumcision, and I've been doing this for 7 years, and I'm a Harvard graduate, and there's a lot of things I could be doing to make a lot of money, and I've always been one of these social justice promoters. So I just want to say that because people may be thinking, oh, he's going to make $100,000 on this case.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
Excellent.
It's a very,
as we all know here at the Men's Forum.
It's a difficult issue, Gary, and as we're all saying here, the courts don't understand it, judges don't understand it, so it's a long road to hoe, but we're getting there.
Well, if you ask me, this is one of the most important issues that I'm tackling on the Men's Forum and in my activism, because you can make a direct difference on boys' and men's lives. That's a mutilation.
And thank you for doing that.
Mutilation.
Thank you for doing that.
Of course.
I see it really as connected to so many things too, because if we can do this to boys, infants, not even boys, if we can go to these children, babies, at their earliest days, and we can hurt them, and we can cut off part of their body, and we can feel okay about it, and at the same time we're passing laws against female genital cutting, which, by the way, we also work against, and I also strongly oppose. But the thing that bothers me is that this doesn't even happen very much in this country relative to male circumcision. And we're so much more concerned about the female, which I think it's great to be concerned about the female, but where's our compassion for our boys? If we're not concerned about boys, are we concerned about males? Are we concerned about men?
What is the problem? Exactly. Well, we're getting to the crux of the problem there. We know what that is. I think it is that there's a bigotry towards men. We care less about men and boys, and the result is that we allow this to happen.
I mean, make no mistake, there are obviously differences between male and female anatomy, and so there's differences between male and female circumcision, and I'm not denying that at all. But it's interesting that the reasons that are stated in the U.S. and elsewhere around the world for male circumcision, hygiene, social custom, protect against problems when the child gets older, medical reasons, which are not really true, all these things are the same reasons that are stated in countries that do female circumcision. And I think we should think about this and not say the two are the same, identically the same, but also not rush to a conclusion that, oh, they're so different that we can't even think about the two issues at the same time. I think we can wonder how it is that we can allow one and not allow the other. And just as with certain situations that women have felt underprivileged and they've compared themselves with males and said, oh, I've come off worse here, I think it's fair to do that in both directions and say, are there areas in which males have come off worse? And I think the answer to both questions has to be yes if you're fair-minded.
I think that attitude is almost universal. Looking at female genital mutilation in other countries, where it's done generally in less than sanitary conditions, and so that looks terrible, and it is terrible.
It is terrible.
Which, of course, we should not condone any sort of circumcision, female or male.
Right.
But all of a sudden, if we bring it into this country, into a nice, clean environment, such as a hospital, all of a sudden it's cleaned up. All of a sudden it's okay. And it's not. It's still a mutilation being done.
Absolutely right. Well, here's the irony, and I didn't really mean to get too sidetracked on female circumcision, but here's the irony just to think about, and this is exactly what you're saying. The law against female genital mutilation is a federal law. There are state laws also in a number of states, but there's a federal law which became an active law in 1997 that forbids all forms of female circumcision, even a ceremonial nick that would remove no tissue whatsoever, that would just satisfy the religious requirements of the countries these people are from and the religions and faiths these people are from. It's a serious matter. If somebody immigrates to the U.S., they believe in their faith. They would like to observe their religion. They're willing not to cut off any flesh from their child. All they want to do is something that will enable them to maintain their faith. They're barred from doing that. Now, I don't say that that's wrong to bar them from doing that, but what I do say is, why do we bar even something that won't take any tissue off the female, and at the same time allow something that removes half the surface tissue of the male genitals? That's a huge difference. I mean, you're removing tissue that becomes the size of a 3x5 index card of tissue when the infant grows to be an adult. That's a serious amount of tissue. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to realize that you lose that amount of tissue with nerves in it, heavily nerve-laden specialized tissue that exists nowhere else on the body. You lose that, you're going to lose some sensitivity. You don't have to be smart to, just as obvious. And so the disparity is what I'm wondering about. Why do we allow the disparity between the one and the other? And I think you've pointed to it. We think about females differently than we think about males. And that's okay. I don't object to that in itself, but what I do object to is not trying to be as fair to both as we can.
I think things are changing. What are the statistics now is how many infant boys are What's the percentage of boys that are getting
Well,
circumcised?
it's going down, you're right. Not going down as quickly as we'd like, but back in the 1980s it was up around 90%, and gradually it's gone down to the point where it's around 60-something, 62, 63%. And it is going down. In the western states it's below 50%. In Washington it's around 35%. In California it's below 50%. In other states it's gone down significantly. There are still places in the U.S. where the rate is very high, and we're concerned about that. But we are encouraged that it's going down. We're encouraged, as I say, that a number of people of official importance are starting to be concerned about this issue. There's been reports on major news shows, 2020. This is not a fringe thing. If it ever was, it's not now. It's something that, and guys are just saying, hey, you know, what happened to my foreskin? What's the deal here? And again, it's not, you don't have to be an unusual person to wonder about why you lost something that was your birthright.
And it's such a secretive thing. Still, I believe a majority of people don't exactly know what it is, why it's done. I tell you myself,
Absolutely.
I look at myself, and I see a scar there from the earliest time I remember. It looked like a scar, although I've never really seen a scar, but it didn't look normal to me. And sure enough, it is a scar.
It's a scar. If
Yeah.
you're circumcised, you have a scar. You have a wound.
And I was one of the luckier ones where I didn't have a deformity, or at least a serious deformity. I believe that all circumcisions do result in a deformity of some sort.
By definition, it was not intended to be that way.
Mhm.
That's right.
And now this hygiene thing, I get into discussions with people where they say, well, you know, it's for hygiene and it prevents infections. And is that any reason whatsoever to mutilate someone? We don't mutilate any other part of the body because we don't feel like cleaning it? Go ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, circumcision of dogs is illegal. Why is circumcision of
Is it?
human males allowed? No, the hygiene thing is ridiculous. I mean, if hygiene were the reason, we should be circumcising girls as well, because girls are actually get more urinary tract infections, and it's more difficult to keep them clean than it is to keep boys clean for obvious reasons. I mean, boys stick out and girls don't. I mean, you know,
exactly.
it's
Common sense.
soap and water does the trick,
Yep.
and you know, talk to any pediatrician who knows what they're talking about. Soap and water. That's it. And you know, the European males, they're not walking around dropping down dead in the streets, as we said earlier. Soap and water.
And how about this? Also, other people bring up the idea that, well, it's ugly, or we're not used to it. That's too bad if it's ugly. And guess what? You may think it's ugly. We don't think it's ugly. Okay?
Exactly.
Get used to it.
Get used to it, exactly. Can you imagine the reaction if that was ever said about anything having to do with women, if we suggested to them, oh, you have to change this part of your body?
Exactly.
Cut
Cut it off because we don't like it.
And in fact, that also goes on in places that do female circumcision. They're used to the other appearance. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, we may not be as used to the intact penis in America. And if you read medical textbooks, often you cannot even find a picture of the intact penis. You shouldn't even have to say intact penis. You should just be able to say penis.
Penis. Is that what it is?
But the language has been so distorted. People say uncircumcised. Well, that's ridiculous. You know, I'm uncircumcised. I'm unlobotomized. I haven't had either of my legs amputated. You know, I'm faulty.
Unlobotomized? Uncircumcised? Get out! Very good, very good. All right, so, well, anything else you want to say? Actually, let's talk a minute or two about the case.
Sure.
Is there anything else that you needed to tell us about it? What's the next step?
It's an important case because it's a federal case, and it doesn't just involve this one family. It involves a number of families that had the same thing happen to them. They had circumcisions done without their agreement, without them understanding what was meant by it, and even without them agreeing to having it done to their sons, and with serious repercussions in terms of the psychological development, in terms of their future sexuality when they grow up, and in terms of their culture. It wasn't something that they intended. This was a very rude awakening in the U.S., and we must understand that if we're going to say this is a cultural thing, which it isn't, it shouldn't be, but even if we're going to allow it as a cultural thing, we can't be imposing our culture on other people, and this is exactly what we're trying to do in going to Africa and trying to say, well, we want you to do this circumcision because it's going to stop AIDS. Well, it didn't work in the U.S., it's not going to work in Africa. Let's let people be as they want to be, and let's not go around the globe trying to bring the red, white, and blue, which I love and respect as much as anybody, but let's not try to bring it into other countries where it's not the way things are done.
Exactly. Informed consent is needed, and you cannot inform an infant. They cannot give consent.
By definition.
Exactly.
By definition.
And also the AAP American Academy of Pediatricians say it's unnecessary.
That's right. They had a study, and they had a very balanced group, which some people who oppose circumcision don't think they went far enough, but nevertheless what they did say was there's no medical reason to be doing this. And every medical association in the world, and I'm sure you know this, Gary, but every medical association in the world, and there are over 15 of them, including also the American Medical Association and the American Cancer Society, those fringe organizations, every organization has said there's no medical reason for it. Not a single one has said we should be doing it because there's a medical need for it. And that includes these three major American organizations, plus some other American medical organizations we haven't mentioned.
All right, we're out of time. Stephen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For joining us. Very important topic. Please, all our viewers, get informed out there. We gave you some information. Make the choice yourself. Okay. Good night from the Men's Forum.